Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Toe Tags Metal Reviews, and today we're giving you guys our final review of Vile Genesis by Inferi. So, we've listened to this album constantly throughout the entire week, and I'm going to take the floor and say this is a really good album. And I'm going to tell you guys right now what the standout thing about this album is, and for me, it's the solos. Now, throughout this whole week, I can't count the amount of times I've been listening to this record, and then a solo comes on, and I turn my head thinking, what was that? Because every time a solo happens, it's phenomenal. The solos don't feel samey, they feel like there's something fresh every time, and they're always hooking my ear, especially on, which track was it? The title track, which is still my favorite track on the album. I think it kind of just blew by me in our first impressions, where in that quiet part, there's a bass solo. I didn't even realize that at the time, and when I heard it throughout the week, I'm like, what? There's a bass solo too? Are you kidding me? I think that song has like 3 solos total, and they're all great. And I just loved that. Every time a solo came on, I loved it. The only thing that kind of felt a little weird about listening to this album for me is that songs did tend to feel a little samey, like, overall. However, it was good. You know, there's a standard for these songs, and it's a really high standard. I just kind of felt from time to time where I'm listening to a song thinking, like, okay, it's kind of doing the same general stuff as the other ones, but I still like it. You know, like, it doesn't feel like it's too much to a fault, but it's something I noticed throughout the week.
I can kind of get what you mean. I'm trying to pinpoint exactly what about it makes it feel that way, and my thought process is drawing me to the vocals.
That is a part of it, I guess.
Like, the vocals aren't plain. There's some range there. There's some harmonies. There's some highs, lows, whatever. But it feels like all of that is in every song, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like you gotta, like I said, the standard is really high, but it kind of feels like they're using that kind of same standard for every song.
Like
but it's
hitting the same bar each time.
Yeah.
It's a high bar, though.
It is a high bar. They set a really high bar with this album. Like I said, it sounds great. I'm just kind of thinking, like, okay, every song is kind of doing a similar thing to itself, but it's not bad because that similar thing is a really good thing that it's doing.
I don't want to get too far off of guitar solos because I want to talk about the solos on this album, too. Awesome. Love them. One of my favorite parts about this album as well. They do something here that I've noticed that I don't recall noticing any other bands do. So a lot of bands, when they do solos, basically what happens is you have one guy doing the solo, the other guy doing a rhythm. Or you have a trade-off where one guy does a solo and then the other guy does a solo after. Maybe they go back and forth. There's different variations of the way different bands do it. What I notice in this album, what they do is they do have 2 guys that do solos, but one guy will be doing a solo, the other guy will be doing a rhythm, but then the guy that's doing rhythm will just join in and harmonize parts of the solo with the first guy and accent parts of the solo. So if you listen carefully, you'll hear the solo playing out and then certain parts are just emphasized because they're both now playing the same part. Just in little parts here and there. I think that's really cool. It just makes the solo sound more dynamic. And I noticed that throughout the album. Maelstrom Prison has that. Mesmeric Horror, I'm pretty sure, has a part like that. And Vile Genesis, I think, also has one solo like that. Really cool stuff. Another cool thing about the solos is there's the songs that have them, there's like 2 per song kind of thing. The first solo is always kind of like, almost like a teaser. It's like always shorter, not as, you know, crazy. And then you're like, oh, that was pretty good. I like that solo. And then you'll go a minute later or so, and then the beefy solo happens, and you're like, whoa, thank you so much for that. Really cool stuff. So, one of my favorite parts on the whole album, I'll just continue as I'm talking here. One of my favorite parts of the whole album has to do with the solo, but it's not exactly the solo. And it's in Simian Hive, which is my favorite track on the album. It became my #1 track, and it still is my #1 track because this track is sick. So, about a minute in, just before a minute in, there's a little solo. And then after that, there's that dirty groove, right? The way this happens is the solo kind of has an upward trend. It's like kind of thing, right? And then doom, the fucking beat drops, the double bass kicks in, and that it reminds me of like a roller coaster. It's like go up
and then drops over.
It's so sick. And that one groove section that reminds me a lot of Deicide. I don't know exactly why, but the vocals, the riffing, everything there is less like, this to me sounds like just DSI satanic, black and death metal, whatever you want to call it.
That's something else I kind of actually made a note of, believe it or not. Like I wrote Simian Hive, like 1 minute mark. There's like a more classic death metal groove going on here.
So
and that's
sick.
Badass. And I think that's really especially cool considering what this album has to offer. That's just another extra thing on top of just the wild explosion that is Vile Genesis as an album.
Yeah. Couple other notes I have. Carving Thine Kingdom, which was my highest rated track on the first impressions. Still a really good track, still think it's awesome, but one thing I noticed is the intro sounds a lot like the Walking Dead theme song to me. I don't know if anybody knows the Walking Dead theme song. I'm sure there's a lot of people that watch Walking Dead. But it's very similar to that. Not that that's a bad thing at all. It's just something I noticed. Another thing I noticed in Mesmeric Horror, for one, the rests that they do. They have those 2 rests that they do in the song. Really cool. Adds a nice dynamic. But there's a cool little some keyboard that adds some cool ambience throughout the song. Very subtle, very tastefully implemented, right? Stuff like that, not just in that song, but throughout the album. You mentioned something earlier in the week, harpsichord or something like that?
It's regarding Heirs to the Descent. In a part of the intro, there's a keyboard part which kind of sounds like a harpsichord playing 16th notes, and it's totally in the background. It's kind of hard to notice. You'll hear him playing it on the hi-hat as well, like the 16th notes to match, and it's a really cool small thing that I noticed. And that's one thing that really meant a lot to my enjoyment of the album, because I did say earlier in this review that it did feel a little bit samey, but then moments like that started to stand out. Moments like this Simian Hive death metal group started to stand out, and that I really enjoyed. The fact that, wow, a lot of these songs are kind of doing a similar thing here, but I can still, if I listen enough, pick out small things from songs that I enjoy. And that is the mark of a great album.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think the album's pretty strong. I think I'm ready to rate it.
All right, what do you give it?
Okay, well, this is actually pretty difficult for me. As much as I'm praising this album right now, this is not the easiest, and there's a specific reason for this, okay? So, cover to cover, this album is awesome. I love the whole thing. But my problem with it is, and there is a problem, is that I feel like it lacks originality. If you guys watch this channel, if you're regular viewers, you know I'm one of those people that gets reminded of things all the time. And when I don't get reminded of something, that's when I'm the most impressed. So I already mentioned it reminds me of DSI, certain one part, but still. A lot of it though, get Carnifex vibes here and there, Diarda's Murder vibes here and there, but mostly Black Dahlia Murder. I feel like this is Black Dahlia Murder's younger brother, or whatever, however you want to put it.
Younger and angrier.
Younger and angrier. Now, it's different in ways, but it's just too similar overall. And the fact that it lacks its own real identity is gonna prevent it from getting a toe tag for me, which fucking sucks because I really wanted to give it one. I really, really do, but it needs that to get that from me. So it's gonna get a 7.5. Ouch! Sorry. It's a phenomenal album. It really is, but it's just it reminds me too much of other things. They really need to find something to give it its own personality. I'm sorry.
Well,
7.5.
That's totally understandable, and I know that's something we talked about. I'm not sure if we talked about in our first impressions or not, but I know it's something we did discuss as we listened to this record last week.
Yeah.
And I can understand that perspective. And to a degree, I agree. However, the fact that you can call this an angrier little brother kind of shows the originality with this album. And I find that it's like if you took the Black Dahlia Murder and just got them hopped up on steroids or some kind of crazy drug.
Pretty much.
Take what you know from that band and amplify the energy, amplify the power, just amplify everything to a really strong degree. So that's why it's going to get my toe tag, because it's a great album cover to cover, and I feel like it does kind of give you something that you haven't really seen before. Because what other band have you really heard that sounds like Black Dahlia Murder on steroids? Like, that's a really specific kind of comment to make.
But that's the thing, Black Dahlia Murder, I think, has their own specific sound. So to take that sound and just crank it up a little notch, you're not really doing much.
You're doing something.
You're not doing much. You're doing something, sure. I'm not saying they're a carbon copy. They don't sound exactly the same. but it's too much like them. So,
Well,
I don't know. It just, I wish there was some more originality. I wish there was less about it that reminded me of other things. I want to listen to Inferi, and I want it to sound like Inferi, and I don't want to have Black Dahlia. I don't want to be sitting there thinking, this does sound like Trevor. Wow, it sounds a lot like Trevor. It's like a little different here and there, but it's like from the vocals to the arrangements to everything, it just screams Black Dahlia to me.
well,
So
let us know in the comments who you agree with more, Vile or myself.
I still gave it a 7.5, by the way.
Exactly.
It's not like I'm
don't
giving it a 2.
Don't knock on him. He's still giving it a pretty high rating here. 7.5 and a toe tag. That's a really strong album regardless.
Yeah.
Just let us know in the comments, what do you think of this album? Would you give it a toe tag, or would you give it a 7.5? Would you give it a 5? I don't know. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And that's all we got for you guys. Remember to subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, and like the video if you liked it. I'm TV Fish.
And I'm Vile Self.
Keep the horns up.